Welcome on to the next edition of Up. Yep, we are heading towards Pietermaritzburg for the 2026 Comrades Marathon as we continue our build-up to race day next year. And as I've mentioned in the last few podcasts, we are mixing things up the second half of the year where we'll have Lindsay on and talking some training, but we also are introducing a few guests along the way, some familiar faces, some not so familiar faces to the Coach Parry platform. We've had some on webinars before and some are brand new. And today we've got a returning face, someone we had on one of our Comrades webinars in the build-up to the 2025 Comrades Marathon for the very first time. And it was probably one of our most popular webinars. And we thought we'd get him back on just to have a bit more of a general chat. Obviously, on those webinars, we don't have a ton of time with our guests, but on this podcast, we do have a little bit more. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome one of the Comrades Marathon board members onto Up. He's a Comrades runner in his own right, but has done some amazing things on the Comrades Marathon board in the build-up to 2025. And hopefully we'll be doing more of the same in the build-up to 2026. Rory Steyn, welcome onto Up. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's lovely to be back, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Rory, I'm so
glad
excited.
I'm glad that we've already moved to Up because of the 6 ups and 6 downs that I've done, I far prefer the up. So all those people who had very, very sore legs, just know that it's much easier going uphill.
You and me both. You're definitely not built like Tete.
No,
you're more
exactly.
And you're not close to me from a physical point of view, but you're one of the bigger runners. So definitely the up, I think, is less painful for us bigger guys. But
that's the point.
Yeah, let's be honest. It doesn't make it easier. It just makes it less painful. I think is probably the way.
Brad. I mean, you know, guys that weigh what we do are always going to go downhill faster and easier than we go up them. But the pain of that last quarter or last third of Comrades just does not exist on the up run. So yeah, I take the up any day.
Absolutely. Rory, just so we know what we're going to cover and that everybody watching this knows what's coming. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the things that I don't want to say went wrong at Comrades, because I don't think there's ever a right or wrong. It's like you always learn from things that don't go according to plan, and there's lots of learnings that you can take out for 2026 and particularly 2027. We're going to touch on a few of those. We'll talk about the finish, the start. Also, I wanted to touch on the elite tables specifically. We'll talk a little bit about that. What I also wanted to talk about was the Comrades board and why we need a Comrades board and what its actual role is. And then I wanted to find out a little bit more about you. And obviously your background when it comes to Comrades and why Comrades. I mean, there's lots of things fighting for our attention as human beings. And I think that's probably a good place to start is what makes Comrades so special for you? Like, why are you investing time as a volunteer with the Comrades Marathon?
Great question, Brad. And I think there's no short answer, but the true answer is that I absolutely love this race. And it's not just because the fact that I became a green number. And by the way, I do see the green numbers, those who've finished more than 10 are almost like the alumni of the race. And we should be the ones that guide and steer, its direction and its continued existence and protect its, not just the ethos, but even the genesis of the race, bearing in mind that it was started by a returning World War I veteran who wanted to institute a physical challenge that was challenging enough to do justice and pay homage to the ultimate sacrifice made by so many of his comrades, hence the name Comrades. And as I say, I see the green numbers as that alumni, but that's a very informal, it's probably partly my own opinion. There's nothing formalized about that. So the board is the entity that owns, the oversight, the strategic direction, and the governance of the Comrades Marathon Association. And I want to point that out because the board does not organize the Comrades Marathon Association, the Comrades Marathon, the race year by year. But we are responsible for it, and we are accountable to our customers, who are you, Brad. You guys that are our runners, and their families and their clubs are our customers. So that's the board's role. And one of the reasons I'm even on the board this year is because that line got blurred in the very recent past, where board members were becoming too involved and were too operational. And maybe it can be argued that was because it was in their interest, if they can arrange this cousin or that brother or that friend to be a vendor, then it benefited them. So there was that kind of drawing the line in the sand that our role is X, and X is oversight, strategic direction, and governance. And our role is not Y. We have a race operations director and an entire race organizing committee whose job it is. That committee is a subcommittee of the board, yes, and it's chaired by a board chairperson, but no board chairperson can be on the race organizing committee. We have a race advisory committee where we've got some serious heavyweight experts. We've got Barry Holland on there, who's, as you know, finished 49 and he's run 50. And some very, very good technical experts. So there's an advisory committee that advises that organizing committee, and no board member serves on the organizing committee, so that we keep that line in the sand, Brad. So that's why the board. But why Comrades is a question going back to the late or mid 80s, 1980s. I ruptured an ACL in my right knee playing rugby and had the surgery, and the surgeon instructed me to go and see a certain firm of physiotherapists. And just as would happen the day that I walked in the door, the lady who treated my injury and then continued with 6 months of rehab was herself a green number runner. And I remember and she's a delight. She's a great friend of mine. Her name is Tony Hesp. I think Tony is number 2 on the list of women with the most Comrades finishes. 33 or 4, I think Tony has now. And at the time, she had something in the teens. And I said to her, why would anybody run so far? Are you mad? Are you out of my mind? Speaking like a typical rugby player, who can play for 80 minutes and maybe train for a couple of hours, but then that's it. And the more I worked the 6 months through with her rehab and the more I picked her brain, I said, okay, one day, I said, I'll tell you what, Tony, you fix this knee so that I can play rugby again. And my word to you will be that when I'm done with rugby one day, I'll come and run Comrades with you. And so it turned out to be. And in 2000, after I'd finished my time with Madiba, I lined up and I ran with Tony, and we finished my first run, which was the up run of 2000. The first time we had 24,000 entries. It was a massive field, but it was an up run, unlike the down run that you've just finished in 11:59:59. By the way, Brad and I neglected to congratulate you publicly on that. I mean, it's an extraordinary achievement to be almost the last man over the line, and for somebody that is big and heavy as you to do that in 12 hours is just a massive undertaking. I challenge anybody listening to this who's not a runner and is trying to understand what I'm saying here. Try doing this. Try waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, having breakfast at some time, and just stay on your feet and don't get off your feet once until supper time, and see if you can do that. That's what Brad just did, guys. And when he started in Pietermaritzburg, it was pitch dark. The sun came up maybe an hour into the run. And when he came into Durban and finished, it was pitch dark. Now you go and try and do that and not eat and not drink enough and see how you feel after 12 hours. So it's a massive achievement, Brad. But anyway, back to why Comrades. So I'd made this undertaking to Tony in 1988. She did fix my knee, did a brilliant job. I was able to play right up until 94, and then transferred onto Madiba's team. And I could only finish with him in 99 when he retired. There wasn't time to do all that Comrades training then. And that's why in 2000, I stood on the start line. But in 96, I stood with the president on the finish line at the agricultural showgrounds in Pietermaritzburg for the uprun of 96. And I remember they came and called him like 5 minutes before the final gun was fired. And there we stood as these runners came across the line, Brad, and it was every size, color, shape, age, gender that you can imagine in various forms of celebration. Some were in floods of tears, some punched the air, some fell flat on their faces and rolled on their backs. But I looked at this in just those 5 final minutes coming across the line, and then I remembered what I'd said to Tony, and I thought, I've absolutely got to do this. It just captivated me because it is such a South African day. Comrades, I mean, How many people do you know that have never run Comrades, but they'll tell you, I do not move out of my bed. I might make a cup of coffee or tea or a few of them, but I don't even get out of my pajamas until Rory Steyn or Tete Dijana has come into the, broken the tape. In my day, when I was watching, way back in the early 80s, it was Fordyce. He's a friend of mine today, but at the time that I was a special branch cop, I couldn't stand the little bliksem, the little Witzy running with his black armband, little Batucha there. But still, I just admired the incredible athleticism of this guy. And as he says, tongue in cheek, he says, to win Comrades, you've got to pick your parents very carefully. And I mean, Bruce, as Tim Noakes will tell you, is perfectly built for Comrades because he's the small, light guy, but he's got big thighs for running up hills powerfully, and he's got a massive VO2 max capacity. So he's just built to run not marathons, but endurance events beyond the marathon. And I didn't get out of my bed until Fordyce had come in and broken the tape. And then I remember that run of Frith van der Merwe. I mean, 5:54 and coming 15th overall. She beat everybody in that field except 14 men. And there's that wonderful photograph of Graham Fraser of Hillcrest Villages. Yeah, turning around and running the other way. You see Frith coming in, and Graham Fraser's back and he's running away because he said publicly, the day a woman beats me is the day I stop running Comrades. And he literally ran off the course. He didn't finish. He was in the top 20. Frith came past him and he thought, bugger this, he's close to home. He just ran off the course and went home and never ran again. Just an extraordinary achievement. And talking about Fordyce, you can ask him independently of me, Brad, get him on the show and ask Bruce, who is the greatest comrade? And he will always say, I'm not sure which person specifically is the greatest comrade. And firstly, he's too humble to say, I am, because I won 9 of them. But he'll tell you that the 3 greatest runs, he used to point to 2 greatest runs, and he's since added a third. He'll say that the 3 greatest runs of Comrades were Frith van der Merwe, 5:54 in 1989, coming 15th overall. The same year, Wally Hayward, a 5-time winner, at the age of 79 years old, running 9:44. 79, and he runs 9:44. That beats 75% of the field. And then he points to Alan Robb's the first man to break 5 hours 30, and he won the race by 20 minutes. And, that was the race. I think Bruce came 14th that year, and then he came 3rd, and then he came 2nd, and then he beat Alan. And both Alan and, well, certainly Alan would have won 5 Comrades were it not for the rise of the Fordyce era. Bruce says that if Wally Hayward were not banned for 20 years, and, they banned him as a professional, this is in the amateur era, he accepted, I don't know, it was something ridiculous like a couple of pence. He accepted somebody to pay his traveling costs to fly from Joburg to London to compete in an event, and they banned him. And then they forgot that they'd banned him. So he, as I say, he won in 1935, got banned somewhere in between. You can do the research. And then come 1955, when he entered, he said, hey, guys, can I actually enter Comrades now? I mean, how long is my ban? And the South African Amateur Athletics Federation said something like, oh, are you still banned? And they said, yeah, okay, you can run. So he wins his second one 20 years after he won his first one. And Bruce says, thank goodness, because else he would have far pipped my 9 medals and probably won 15 or 16 medals. So yeah, anyway, that's a little bit of digression. But, you can hear that I'm passionate about the race and its history. I love the fact that we've got these incredible traditions, the guns and the cutoff medals, and the fact that we name 5 of the hills, and yet that doesn't even account for half of the hills that you run up. We have an up run and a down run, and people don't understand how much climbing and how many hills there are in that down run. I mean, the first 19 kilometers are essentially up, other than the fact that you run down polys and little polys. That's about it. And then you run up until you get to the highest point on the course at Umlaas Road, and then you start rolling hills. And then when you get to the top of Nchanga, you start running seriously downhill. And that's why, as you well know, Brad, on your own podcast, Lindsay's plan of running negative splits is such a good one, because you've got to be so conservative in that first half. And even when I ultimately ran my one bull roan, out of my 12 comrades, I chased a bull roan 7 times, and I only ran it once. And I ran an 8:58 something, 8:58 low. And I also have, by the way, a 9-hour, 00 minutes and 11 seconds down run. So I missed the bull run by 12 seconds in 2003. And it took 3 years to get that monkey off my back. But again, you've got to, even on that up run, you've got to run conservatively, because you've got to have legs. Once you get to the top of Polly Shorts on the up, and you see that 8 kilometers to go board, and it's like a club time trial, you think, I need legs now. I need to not have smashed legs, because you've saved them in the first half. I mean, the uprun's beauty is that 80% of the hills come in just over the first half. I mean, if you consider Cowie's Hill, Fields Hill, Botha's Hill, and in Changa, that's just after halfway. So 4 of the 5 big hills are out of the way, and to have the ability to be able to run still in that second half. So yeah.
Absolutely. Rory, yeah, thank you for acknowledging my 11:59:59. Just that everybody knows, and we've said this, it was not planned. A lot of people have been asking if we planned it. It was not planned. It was a dog fight.
I believe you.
But yeah, I will take it. I'll definitely take an 11:59:59. Rory, let's talk about the boards for CMA. And,
sure.
And for a lot of Comrades runners, I'm not sure if we all fully understand the structure of how things work. And you mentioned the governance and oversight role of the board, which is a separate entity to the Comrades Marathon sort of organizing committee, but then obviously the team that is based out of Pietermaritzburg that works full-time for the race. And you mentioned in previous dispensations, and that was part of the reason why you are where you are now, is because of the overreach from previous boards.
Yes.
And being involved and organizing and trying to organize, and that causes its own issues. And this, let's be honest, Rory, this isn't specific to just Comrades. I think this is one of the big problems in South African society,
correct,
particularly in government, where, and one of my favorite hobbies is watching the SCOPA hearing meetings on YouTube. I just love watching people being held to account. And that is partly one of the problems within South Africa, is there's a lot of overreach. I worked for the SABC a number of years ago when there was massive overreach from the board within the SABC. So yeah, it's not something that's exclusive to Comrades. It is, I think, very much a South African issue, and it's something we do need to deal with as a society as a whole. But I think it's important to understand the role of the Comrades Marathon board and what their function is and what their function is not. I think that's also very important. And I want to ask you a question. So obviously you're talking about the oversight, and I think because there is so much passion on the Comrades board, and I think this could also cause an issue. And I think specifically of yourself, and I think every single board member feels the same way about Comrades, otherwise they wouldn't be there, that because you love the race so much, it's easy to overstep because you want the best for the race. How do you draw that line as a board member where I'm here for oversight, I'm not here to actually organize this race?
So that's a great question, and I can only tell you from a personal experience, and bear in mind, I'm a very green board member. I haven't even been a member of this board for a year. So on race day, that is exactly what was happening. I was getting phone calls from all and sundry precisely because of my safety and security. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I've done for 44 years, 18 of them as a cop and 26 years in private security. That's kind of all I know. So I'm the board member who has, and again, it's nothing formal, but I keep an eye on safety and security issues because, I've done it for 44 years. But I was getting phone calls when we were having that massive crush at the finish with the runners trying to get out of the runner footprint after getting a medal and into People's Park, and the families who have now been arriving and parking, coming into People's Park. And we had this ridiculous crush of people there. I was getting all of those phone calls, whereas as a board member, that is not my role. But of course, you must do something because we almost had a disaster there. And, and we can talk about that because I don't mind admitting when we got it wrong, Brad. So you say,
I'm happy to say we did get stuff wrong, and the finish was one of them, and the elite tables was another. In fact, those were probably the two things that we got wrong this year, and we've learnt the lessons from that. We know how to fix them, but we can't deny the fact that they went wrong. And there's another race where the board decided to go down that route and defend the indefensible, and it wasn't our fault, and that's just stupid. And they lost hands down in the High Court and now have to pay for that. But we're not going to do that. We know we got some aspects of the finish wrong. We know we got many aspects of the finish right. We know we got the elite tables wrong. And those are our customers. We only have two groups of customers in our race. It's the 22,000 people like you, Brad, who do 4 to 9 months of training and put a lot of time in it, sacrifice a lot of time away from families and work and friends and socializing and all of that. And, I know because I've been there. I know what it takes to stand on that start line ready to run 90 kilometers. And it's a big sacrifice. You are our customers. We wanted, as a board, we stated it as an intention that we want to bring a runner-centric Comrades back, make it about the runner. And the other customers are the elite runners, those running for prize money, those whose livelihood, as you pointed out earlier, depend on it. And we did not get the teams right, despite an incredible amount of work from our race advisory committee. So a subcommittee of that was headed by an incredibly qualified, super qualified, technically proficient guy who's a running referee in his normal life when he's not heading the elite tables. And some incredible work went in. Then we were just dropped on the day by vendors and suppliers who basically they didn't deliver the tables, and the security to be at those tables, making sure that nothing could be introduced to those elite water bottles. So if somebody failed the doping test at the end of the run and was disqualified from a considerable amount of money, we could say that these were the protocols that were followed. We were dropped by them, but that's not to say that we absolve ourselves of that accountability. We can't, Brad. It was up to us to get it right, and we didn't get it right. There's a lot of understanding of that, having explained it to the team managers. But we need those guys, and we need them to bring the star athletes. I mean, imagine a Comrades without a Rory Steyn or a Tete Dijana, or a Piet coming all the way from Holland and pushing Tete in the way that he's done, in 2 out of the last 3 Comrades. That's what we need, and that's what people switch their TVs on for. And then we want to see those masses coming across the line as those cutoff guns are going, because that's why people come from all over the world. I mean, thousands of them come to run our race because it's not a mat-to-mat race. We keep to the traditions of having those cutoffs, because for 97 years that is what Comrades has been. And at times like this year, it was very, very difficult to do that, Brad. And I don't want to rehash what I've already said on your podcast, but because of the narrowness of the streets in Pietermaritzburg, and particularly once you come out of the city and you get onto Polly Shorts, which is it's not a very wide piece of road, you cannot have 22,000 people going down there. Only one person needs to fall, and then you have people trampled and severely injured or possibly worse. And then the runners say to us as Comrades, but why did you allow this? So we had to go with the 2 starts.
Rory,
I have to admit, against my
can-
better judgment, Brad.
if I can just
sure.
jump in there before you talk about the actual 2 starts, there's been
Yes.
a lot of there's been a lot of criticism on the CMA and Comrades with regards to the 2 starts and at the different times. And I think
Yes.
there's been lots of comparison between the Comrades start and like the major starts and London, New York. And I'm going to use London as an example here because I ran London a couple of years ago, so I experienced it. So what a lot of people are saying is that why don't we have 2 or 3 separate starts at the same time and filter people in that way down the line?
Yeah.
And I don't think people really understand. London is a massive city. New York is a massive city. You've got lots of roads that you can feed into. Pietermaritzburg is tiny. There's literally the road that we run out of Pietermaritzburg is 1 single lane road. So it's 2 lanes in and out. So you can have as many starts as you want. You cannot bottleneck people onto Polly Shorts. That's the long and short of it. So you can have as many starts as you want in Pietermaritzburg. The city center does lend itself to do it. but we still have
Spot
to
on.
filter into one road, and that is just not practical. So I think the solution that you guys had for the start this year, yes, there were issues with the launch sequence, and we can discuss that at nauseum if we'd like, but I think that is the only option to get multiple starts in Pietermaritzburg, is to have them behind each other with a time gap in between. Doing it at the same time and trying to get 30,000 people, because that's what you guys are optimizing for, is to try and get the 100th fairly big. There's no
Yes.
way you can get 30,000 people squeezing into 2 lanes on Polly Shorts trying to get out of Pietermaritzburg. It is just not going to happen. If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Bang on, Brad. And bear in mind that I was one of the guys, because I've run 4 Londons and a New York. So I know about the different starts. I mean, in London, you've got red, green, and yellow starts. And I think they only converge something like 5 or 6 or 7 Ks into the race. But as you say, you've got
Rory,
these wide roads.
If I can add to that too, it's not just one start in London. You have multiple starts.
Three starts, yeah.
No, what I mean is timing-wise. So
timing, yeah, because it's mat to mat.
Yes.
So there's no pressure.
Exactly.
No pressure. Doesn't matter how long it takes you to get over the start line, because your time only starts when your timing chip crosses the start line. Now, we can't do that, or we can, but then you abandon 97 years of tradition. How can you have a cut-off gun, for Wally Hayward, silver medal, Isabel Rush Kelly, Bill Rowan, Robert Mchadi,
again,
bronze.
I don't want to throw stones at people, but
yeah.
Two Oceans is a great learning experience here for Comrades, because Two Oceans have done exactly that, where they've got rolling starts now. They also have multiple medals. And if you've run Two Oceans in the last few years, the finish is an absolute mess. So, I'm not knocking Two Oceans. I love the race too.
Yeah.
But there's great learnings to take out of Two Oceans. You can't do that for that exact reason.
Exactly. So mat to mat is perfect, and it is absolutely the modern way to do mass participation events. I've no doubt about that. And as I say, I've run 5 of them, 4 Londons and 1 New York. I understand that there's no pressure. You just walk up, in your own time, and boom, as you cross the line, your time starts. But if we want to maintain, and I for one certainly want, and I never want to be the board member who stands before 100,000 plus current and former Comrades runners and has to explain to them why we're doing away with those traditions. I will never do that. I'd rather limit the field then. Honestly, Brad, that's my personal perspective. But you can't do what's called a wave start, which is mat to mat in Comrades, because of that. So I was the one who said, hey, if we're going to have 2 starts, let's at least start them at 2 different places in Pietermaritzburg. But I was shown by one of the technical experts, who's a lot smarter than I am, on the race advisory committee, that you can have 10 different starts in Maritzburg. You've got to converge them somewhere before Polly Shorts. And it doesn't matter how many starts you have, when you get into that little narrow road, you're going to have a bottleneck if you start at the same time, which is why we went with the two different starts. And really, Brad, the only thing that went wrong there was the firing pin on the naval cannon didn't go, so we didn't hear the big boom. And people criticized. My own brother was all over it on Facebook. What are you doing? How can you have 2 starts at Comrades? And everybody loved the 2 starts. So we got that right. But we didn't get the finish as right as what we got the start. And you're quite correct, Brad. We always said that 2025 is the last opportunity to test for 2027, which is the 100th running. And there were 34 runners who started the first Comrades in 1921. So there is a school of thought that asks, can we get 34,000 runners to start the 100th one, to pay homage to the 34 runners that started in 1921. We don't know the answer to that yet, because we specifically said the only way we can know the answer is to get data from 2025. So we had finish time, our timing vendor, put additional mats in at certain strategic points so that we now know exactly what the flow rates look like, including on poly shorts. So that decision can only be made once we've examined the data, once we've engaged with a lot of people, including the city authorities in Pietermaritzburg, once we engage with people like civil engineers to even see whether we can possibly widen the road before we can say we can put more than the 22,000 that started this year down that route. We don't know the answer to that yet. And that's why we are quite happy to make mistakes, because as Nelson Mandela and many others taught us, you learn by getting up each time you fall. I mean, what did Thomas Edison say? You know, his light bulb didn't work 1,000 times before it actually lit up. And today we have light in all its extraordinary forms. So you learn by your mistakes. If you're not prepared to learn from your mistakes, then please go and do something else. But don't try and organize the Comrades Marathon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rory, before we touch on the finish, let me just add something to that
Sure.
start as well. And this is just as a pure runner, not involved. Obviously, I'm involved with Coach Parry, and I love Comrades. But as a pure runner,
Yes.
the start was great. And I will say this: I was at the front of wave 2, so there were no sound issues where I was. The only thing that where it did sort of play into, and I understand why it was a later start.
Tell me.
Is possibly getting the timing between those two waves slightly longer, so maybe an extra 5 minutes to get that full launch sequence, because I think that's where a lot of people weren't happy that they only got Chariots of Fire in the second wave. Obviously, I was at the front, so I heard the whole thing, which was great, but it would have been nice to have the whole launch sequence again. And then obviously with the race starting 15 minutes and then half an hour later to the normal traditional 5:30 start, it did mean that we finished much later in Durban. So that's the knock-on effect there. So particularly on a hot day, and it was fairly hot, but again, it swings in roundabouts, because if you start later, you finish later, so it's a bit cooler. But possibly a 5:30 start again in Maritzburg, and then a 20 to 6 as an example. I'm not saying that is the number, just to allow that little bit of extra time into the start to move it forward. And then the second thing I want to add about the start, and this is around the limiting numbers.
Can I just respond to that, Brad? Because that's exactly the kind of feedback that we want to hear. So first of all, that's the first time that anybody has suggested that maybe not 15 minutes between Group 1 and Group 2 start, maybe 20. Great suggestion. And we wanted to only have one set of start formalities, Shosholoza, the national anthem, Chariots of Fire, the cock crow, and the gun, because it's that special. But we are quite prepared to listen to the runners in Group 2. If they feel that they didn't benefit from that full emotional and otherwise wonderful experience of the start formalities, we're quite happy to listen to that, Brad, quite happy. And I just want to point out that you finishing in 11:59:59 would not have happened if we had had one start.
Yeah, absolutely.
You would have missed it by 10 minutes, or maybe 8 minutes.
Yeah, in our debrief, I literally, in my full race debrief, I put my finishing down to two things, and two of them were actually three. It was three things, and two of them were changes for this year. So the first one was being in the charity batch. If I had used my normal season time and started the back, I wouldn't have finished. That's what it boils down to. The two starts with me being at the front of the second start played a massive role, because if it was one mass start and I was in the old C batch, it would have taken me 2 minutes to cross the start line, where it took me 30 seconds this year. So that is the second. And then the third one, and we're not even going to touch on this because we have spoken at nauseum on the podcast, is the change in the route cutoffs. So making those a lot more lenient, because this was the first time ever, Rory, and I've said this lots, it's the first time ever I've never had to worry about cutoffs other than the last one. And that from a mental stress perspective, because stress is energy. And if you're stressing about that all the time, I could run the race how I wanted to run the race. I wasn't forced to run the race a certain way to get to a cutoff at halfway or a cutoff at Pinetown. And Lindsay did the maths on my race this year, that if it was the old start with the old cutoffs, I wouldn't have made it past Pinetown.
You would have been cut off 3 times.
Correct. And I would have been forced to go faster earlier on, which would have impacted the way I ran later on. So that's without a doubt. The second thing I wanted to add
sorry, go ahead.
Is with regards to numbers. I'm all for making this race as inclusive and as big as possible, but we have to be realistic that there is a number that we can handle as a race that makes it safe, doable, and more is not always better. And I'll use London as an example again, and I want to use a rugby example as well. London Marathon had 1.1 million entries for their ballot this year. They have 20,000 spots. And I know it does make it super exclusive, but that is just the reality. If a city like London can't handle more than that with a rolling wave start with multiple starts, I think it is impractical for a race like Comrades to try and get that big. Comrades is special, and I want as many people as possible to experience this, but we have to be realistic. Bigger is not always better. We want to have a great race experience. And the second thing I'll add with regards to bigger is not always better, a great example, I'm a huge rugby fan, so are you. Super Rugby, when it first started, was flipping amazing. The Super 10, it was phenomenal. And then they made it the Super 12, and then they made it the Super 14, then they made it the Super 15, then they made it, and then people lost interest, and it became watered down, commercial. Nobody actually knew how the competition worked, and it fizzled out. Like nobody watches Super Rugby anymore. And that's the risk that we have by trying to make things bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Comrades is special because of, as you said, the traditions and the ethos about this race. Bigger doesn't equate to better. I think that's all I want to say about that.
It's a great point, Brad. And I'll use another example, the IPL, the second most valuable league in the world after the NFL. The IPL started with 10 teams, and they weren't sure whether it was going to work. Next thing, it becomes this multi-billion-dollar behemoth, and they decide to introduce 2 more teams. So they have a ballot and a what do you call it when you bid for
auction
a draft? Yeah, where you bid for the players. To identify those 2 more teams. Massive corruption. Next thing, the High Court of India must jump in and put the Board of Control for Cricket in India under judicial administration because of all the corruption. And this golden goose, or the goose that laid this golden egg that was the IPL, was tainted because they tried to make it too big and introduce 2 more teams and make it longer with more matches and therefore more TV rights and advertising and all of that. So there's sufficient precedent to know, and we as the board do know that there is a number. And I just say again what I said earlier, Brad, that's why we needed this year to gain that data. And we will look at that data and as a board make the correct decision. That's why I'm saying that there was only a thought of going from 34 in 21 to 34,000 in 27. That might not happen because precisely of what you've said. We may even have exceeded that safe number this year. And we will know that once we examine the data and everything else. We've got a board meeting in a few days' time, which is a virtual one. Then we've got a second board meeting in person in July. And for my sins, I get to chair that board. It's a board subcommittee called V427, which is the vision for 2027, because we want to make that a wonderful event, and it needn't be because we've got 34,000 runners. It might be because we have fewer than 20,000 runners, but it's going to be great. We've got a lot of ideas. We want to make it special. We want to honor everything that Vic Clapham wanted honored when he started the race. And we've got, as I say, lots of very good ideas that you and I can discuss on many future episodes of the pod. But you're quite right. We are not blind to the fact that there is a safe and an ideal number that we will have to adhere to for a whole host of reasons, and we will examine all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Rory, we've spoken about the finish, and I think a lot of people know there were issues, and I'm well aware of this. The board are well aware that there were issues, and some of them are obvious. And I think, like where I finished at like in the last 10 minutes, there were thousands. I think the number was like 4,000 people. I don't know the exact number, but something like 4,000 people finished in the last 10 minutes, which is always the case with Comrades. And if you think about it now, it makes logical sense that splitting the finish shoot half for wave 1 and wave 2 doesn't make sense when 90+% of the runners are coming through from wave 2. So like something like that is a simple fix. Obviously it wasn't thought of in the build-up, but now we know for next time. So like those sorts of things will get fixed up with regards to people filtering out into People's Park. There's lots that we can discuss, and we have discussed.
Exactly.
And I just want people to know that the board are aware of those issues.
Oh, for
Like
sure, Brad.
every single one of those issues, the lighting, the signage, the sort of log jam at the finish. So all of those things are being looked at and are looking to be improved in future editions of the race. So I don't think we need to rehash any of that. I think all of that has been said, particularly
Bang on.
on social media. One thing I did want to briefly touch on, and you did mention, was the elite tables. And I'm glad that you differentiate your two customers. The masses, which are people like me who aren't professional athletes. We do this because we love the race and we want to challenge ourselves. And
The
it's
true
a very,
comrades.
yeah, it's a very and I don't want to say the true comrades, Rory, because the guys and girls who race this thing, it's a massive undertaking. It's not like you're racing a 10K or a 5K and you can do another one in a few weeks' time. Comrades is a massive undertaking as an elite athlete. You put your body under immense stress. And having something like the elite tables not functioning the way they should at a world-class event is impacting people's livelihoods. It's not like they can go and run another race in 2 months' time because they've got time to recover. So I think that we shouldn't play down the importance of getting those things right for our elite field. I know that this race would probably still happen if it wasn't for the elite runners. Like, I mean, the masses are still going to come and run regardless of Rory Steyn and Jane Tete. We love watching them, but it's important to cater for them too. We must never forget about our elites. I think that is the point I want to make. And I know the board are aware of this and are working towards that too.
Yeah, we know where we went wrong. We are not absolving ourselves of any accountability. The plan was a good plan, Brad, and the team managers loved it. You know, we went a little bit to and fro with the team managers on it, but we got buy-in from them. They were happy, and we were just dropped by logistics. Now, could the logistics have been better managed? Absolutely. And that's the lesson that we've learned. So we know what to fix now. We know how to fix it. We know what level or kind of element of management needs to come in so that can't happen again. And I'm telling you, the elite tables will run beautifully. And that was something that the previous race director introduced, and kudos to her. And we wanted to build on that. We didn't have any of the documentation or any of the lessons learned from last year. We've got all of the lessons from this year, and we are going to fix it. It's that simple. We'll fix it for 2026. 2026 is up run, but certainly for the down run, you know, the 100th one, the big one that we've got coming in 2 years' time, is the one that we want to be a particular success for a whole bunch of reasons. Yeah. So all I want to say, if there's one message that I want our customer base out there listening to this podcast, is that we will fix it. We know what went wrong. We know what we did wrong. We're not absolving or shifting accountability. We will fix this thing. You know, Brad, my notes on my cell phone, that notes app, I started making notes at the start because we were timing the last runner of Group 1 coming across the line, 5.5 minutes. The last runner in your group, Group 2, coming across the line, 5:40, 5:45. So very, very accurate. Whereas previously it was anything from 8.5 to 10.5 minutes before you cross the line, and you're losing that time. And then I started making notes as the calls were coming in during the day. At the finish, copious notes. Then we sat the morning after, as I said, and there were notes, and I'm still making notes. And one of them that I've got is what you told me about coming into the finish when it's pitch dark and you've got the SuperSport broadcast lights shining straight into your eyes, so that you didn't even know where the finish line was. I mean, that was something I would never have contemplated. So now we know we need to put the lights on the side and properly flood light that finish precinct, but not so that it's blinding runners with head-on, spotlights. So there's lessons. I've got copious amounts of notes. So have all the other board members, and we know what to fix. I mean, how many times have I said that we're going to fix it, Brad? Yeah.
Absolutely. And if I can just add to this too, Rory, and this isn't to blow smoke, but we spent some time with you on the Monday after that meeting that you had at our sort of aches and pains party, and you were there with your cell phone out asking us questions. So I know you are definitely open to it, and things will change. And then just to wrap up, Rory, I think this is important. Comrades, you said it earlier on, Comrades doesn't belong to anyone. This is our race. It's South Africa's race, and we are custodians of it. I grew up, I loved you talking about sort of watching Bruce in the 80s. That was me. I remember being a little boy. I grew up in the Free State. It was freezing cold in the Free State, and we used to grab our blankets and we used to sit and watch. And my dad was a runner, got his green number, and then we used to go down in the late 80s. And Comrades was, I mean, I get goosebumps talking about it. Comrades was a huge part of my life as a little boy, and I'm convinced that I would be dead if it wasn't for this race. My life wasn't going down a particularly good path.
Yeah.
I was partying too much, and Comrades sort of got me back on the straight and narrow. So I'm hugely invested in this race. I love it. I'm one of the custodians, as are you, as are every single one of the people who run this race and are around this race. And it is up to us to make sure that this race is there for our kids and their kids. And why the race was started, that keeps sort of being pushed forward. It's not this commercial thing. It's about what Comrades is. And there's a way for each of us to be part of this. And to be part of the Comrades Marathon Association. And I wanted you to just touch on why it's important for us to become members and how we go about it. I'll pop the link so if people want to sign up, because there is an AGM coming. But tell us why you think it's important to be a member of the Comrades Marathon Association and the impact that we can have as individuals on this race.
So here's one Comrades member who's holding his hand up and saying that I admit that I was one of those who was possibly asleep at the wheel, because I joined the CMA, I think, when I got my green number, and I think it was something like 30 Rand a year at the time. Now it's a mere 100 Rand a year. That's all it costs to join the CMA, and you're a member for a year, which means you then have a say. You get to vote at the AGM, and you get to elect the board that has this responsibility to retain, protect, and guide the ethos of our great race. So I say, along with many of us, we were asleep at the wheel because we weren't paying sufficient attention to those AGMs and who is getting elected onto the board, and what is their motive for wanting to be there. Is it to serve the race? Because that's really the only motive that there can be or should be, to be on the board. Because I'm telling you now, Brad, it's a lot of time. When people approached me to say, would I throw my hat in the ring, I said, you know what, I actually do have a bit of time on my hands. I didn't have any clue as to how much time it would demand, and we don't get paid 1 cent. Every board member is a volunteer, but every board member has run Comrades. So you've got and that's one of the things that you're quite correct in what you were saying earlier. We have a disease in this country where our sporting bodies are embedded with people who are self-serving. There's too much corruption. And until we get people who are this invested in Comrades, who are absolutely about the customer, the athlete, the race, its ethos, its history. If you've got that kind of person in there, then we can go somewhere. So the board has a chairperson, and he is a wonderful man, Mqondisi Ngcobo, and he resigned from the previous board because he couldn't stomach what was going on, and he didn't want to come back and put his hand up again. And a number of people convinced him to stand again, and I'm delighted. And our vice chairman is a lawyer called Mark Leathers. And two things about Mark: one, he got the most number of votes at the AGM, so therefore he should be in at least the vice chair position. But he's also a lawyer who pro bono fought the battle in the High Court on behalf of the Comrades Marathon Association members. So Mark and Mqondisi are our chair and vice chair. And by the way, both of them ran the Comrades in 2025. Mqondisi got a Bull Rowan, and Mark narrowly missed a Bull Rowan. So we're tremendously proud of that. Then we've got a wonderful communications guy, a brilliant finance lady. We've got Croc and Gwenya, who's done 21 or 22 marathons. We've got Brenda, who's herself a race organizer up here. We've got Nontu, who runs our charities and looks after our underprivileged runners in such a caring way. But ultimately, the work of the board is done, Brad, in a whole bunch of subcommittees. So you've got a finance subcommittee, you've got a marketing subcommittee, you've got a heritage and traditions subcommittee, and I'm the vice chair of that under Croc's chairmanship. You've got a race advisory committee, and then so the work of the board is done in these committees, and we co-opt a bunch of people onto there that we believe add value, and that's the strength of this current board. And we believe that having set ourselves, I mean, think of the risk we took, Brad. Imagine coming on as a new board to say almost let's get a new broom in here and sweep clean a little bit. And then in the first year, we decide to change the start and the finish. We decided to go for this much criticized and now much appreciated 2 starts. Then we changed the finish from a stadium to a street finish, almost to emulate the great races that we've spoken about. It was a massive risk, but for the most part, it worked, other than the stuff that didn't work at the finish. But we know how to improve that. So that's the work of the board. It works it's worked by volunteers in their own time. Like we have board meetings at 5 or 6 p.m. on Friday evenings, Brad. Yokes are all getting ready to go and jaw after having a week of good running training, and we're sitting in blooming board meetings, on your behalf. But we appreciate you, and you are our constituency. Whether you're a Tete Dijana, a Gerda Steyn, or a Brad Nuttall. And by the way, your story is inspiring enough, Brad. Overcoming what you did and getting off quite a dangerous life pathway and finishing 11:59:59. But then you look at Tete and his story.
Yep.
I'm in the security industry. This was a guy who was working a night shift. He didn't have shoes to train in. He used to run to school and back barefoot, and he becomes a Comrades winner. I mean, that is just a fantastic South African story. And there are millions of those stories. Maybe not millions, but there's certainly tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of stories like that. Each Comrades runner has got his own story. I remember after Madiba passed, he's with Mama Grasa Michelle, who I spoke to yesterday. She called us all together after he passed, and she said to the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, she said to him, I'm making this your job because every one of these people sitting here has got their own story, and that's true. And we need to collect those stories. We need to preserve those stories. We need to record them, for posterity before it's too late, before somebody is no longer around or forgets too much about their why in Comrades. And it's all of that. And that's why I'm so passionate about this event, Brad. And I know that you are, and I know that the people that follow this podcast and listen to the Coach Parry stuff are too. So long may that continue, man. We're going to have a wonderful run in 2027, but we're going to also have a very good up run next year. And I hope that you'll find that your medal is going to be just that little bit easier.
Yep. Rory, as always, I love speaking to you. I can talk to you for days. I appreciate your time. I know we've kept you a bit longer than I said I wanted to, but yeah, I just wanted to do this talk. I think it's important, and I'm sure we'll have you on again before next year's up. But thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do for Comrades, and we look forward to catching up again soon.
Anytime, Brad, and thanks for the time offered, and keep going with the Up podcast. I encourage runners to listen to it. And by the way, if you're in the habit of putting a link in here, I encourage all the listeners to Google, or if you find the link, Brad, Amby Burfoot, who won the Chicago Marathon, and he wrote an article. He came and ran one Comrades, and he wrote an article for Runners World USA. He was actually the editor post his 2-hour marathon running days. He became the editor of Runners World, and he writes an article called "Why Comrades is the Greatest Race on Earth." And this is for Americans who worship Boston, because it's probably the only race in the world that is older than 100 years. So it's slightly older than Comrades. And, if you want to know why we get so passionate and emotionally invested, read that article. It's just a great reminder. So if you don't mind putting that link in there, Brad, I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Rory, thank you so much. And then
okay,
just for some correction, on a Friday night at 5 p.m., I'm married. I'm 49. I got 3 kids. I'm not planning on joining. I'm getting ready for bed, just so you know.
Point taken.
Cool. Rory, as always, great to catch up.
Brad. Thanks so much, guys.